How Russian hackers changed the world forever. In 2016, Fancy Bear operatives sitting in a Moscow office changed the course of American history. They didn't fire a single shot. They didn't drop a single bomb. They managed to shake the foundations of democracy itself. This is the story of how digital warfare became real warfare, and how a handful of state-sponsored cybercriminals turned hacking into a weapon of mass disruption, unlike anything the world had seen in cyber warfare. At one point, Dutch intelligence agents even watched Russian hackers work live through their own hacked security cameras. But who exactly were these digital attackers that managed to pull off such an audacious operation? The digital soldiers nobody saw coming. Forget everything you think you know about hackers. These aren't angry teenagers in hoodies typing away in their parents' basements. The Russians who reshaped global politics work in office buildings. They clock in every morning. They get paychecks from the government. They work under GRU or SVR commanders with government funding and clear operational objectives. Meet the bears. That's what Western intelligence agencies call them. Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear, Voodoo Bear. The names sound almost cute, right? Like stuffed animals you'd win at a carnival. But these code names hide something much darker. Intelligence agencies use animal names because the real identities of these groups are classified at the highest levels. Each bear represents a different flavor of digital destruction, and each one serves a different master within Russia's sprawling intelligence apparatus. Western analysts didn't pick these names randomly. They needed a way to track different groups without revealing how much they actually knew about Russian operations. The bear theme stuck because it fit perfectly with Russia's national symbol. But behind these playful codenames operate some of the most sophisticated cyber warfare units the world has ever seen. These groups don't work for cybercriminal syndicates looking to make quick cash or hacktivists trying to make political statements. They work directly for Russian intelligence agencies. The GRU runs Fancy Bear from a building in Moscow known as the Aquarium. The SVR controls Cozy Bear. Each agency operates its hacking units like any other military division, complete with commanders who report up the chain of command, annual budgets approved by government officials, and strategic objectives that align with Russia's foreign policy goals. Picture a typical Russian intelligence office building. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Coffee machines gurgle in break rooms. Employees discuss weekend plans and complain about Moscow traffic. But instead of pushing paper or analyzing satellite photos, these workers spend their days crafting spear-phishing emails and writing malware code. They attend meetings where supervisors assign them targets like foreign election systems or defense contractors. They file reports on successful breaches the same way other government employees document their daily tasks. Russia recruits top cyber talent from across its tech sector, then trains them in operational tradecraft. Once recruited, these hackers receive extensive training, not just in technical skills, but in operational security and tradecraft. They learn how to cover their digital tracks, create convincing fake personas, and coordinate with other intelligence operations. Putin recognized something that other world leaders missed. Traditional espionage takes years to develop assets and extract useful intelligence. Military operations require massive resources and carry enormous political risks. But cyber warfare offers something different. A small team of skilled hackers can penetrate enemy networks, steal sensitive information, and influence public opinion for a fraction of the cost of conventional operations. They can attack targets thousands of miles away without ever leaving Moscow. Most importantly, they can maintain plausible deniability while conducting what amounts to acts of war. This plausible deniability works in practice. When Russian hackers breached the German Bundestag, Chancellor Merkel kept quiet at first, issuing no public accusations. The uncertainty around attribution gives Russia cover to conduct operations that would trigger military responses if carried out by conventional forces. This shift represents a fundamental change in how nations project power. Instead of sending tanks across borders or deploying aircraft carriers near enemy coastlines, Russia sends packets of data through fiber optic cables. The Kremlin discovered they could destabilize entire democracies using nothing more than carefully crafted emails and social media posts. They could steal military secrets, influence elections, and sow chaos among their enemies while sitting safely behind computer screens in climate-controlled offices. These operations don't qualify as simple computer crimes. When state-sponsored hackers penetrate election systems, they're attacking the foundation of democratic governance. When they steal military secrets, they're conducting espionage. When they manipulate public opinion through coordinated disinformation campaigns, they're waging psychological warfare. The only difference between these attacks and traditional acts of war is the weapon used to conduct them. The stakes couldn't be higher. These hackers don't just steal credit card numbers or hold computers for ransom. They target the critical infrastructure that keeps modern societies functioning. They attack the information systems that citizens rely on to make informed decisions about their government. They probe the networks that control power grids, transportation systems, and communication networks. Every successful breach gives them deeper insight into their targets and greater capability to cause harm. By 2016, when most Americans first heard about Russian election interference, these groups had already been perfecting their craft for more than a decade. They had conducted successful operations against targets in Estonia, Georgia, and Ukraine. They had stolen terabytes of sensitive data from government agencies and private companies across Europe and North America. They had tested different techniques for manipulating social media platforms and spreading disinformation. The 2016 election wasn't their first rodeo. It was their masterpiece. And it all started with something as simple as a fake email that looked completely legitimate. Podesta does what any reasonable person would do. He forwards the email to an IT staffer at the Democratic National Committee to double-check its authenticity. The staffer reviews the message and notices something suspicious about the sender's address. This isn't a real Google security alert. It's a trap designed to steal Podesta's login credentials. In a fateful typo, the staffer wrote legitimate instead of illegitimate, giving Podesta free rein to click. Podesta reads the response and assumes the IT expert just gave him the green light. He clicks the link in the phishing email and enters his Gmail password on a fake Google login page controlled by Russian hackers. March 19, 2016, John Podesta opens his email inbox and sees what looks like a standard Google security alert. The subject line reads something he's seen dozens of times before: suspicious activity detected on his account. He needs to reset his password immediately. The email looks legitimate. It has Google's logo. The formatting matches other security alerts he's received. But this isn't from Google. It's from a GRU operative sitting in Moscow, carefully crafting what would become the most consequential phishing email in American political history. The phishing email that broke democracy. The same techniques that compromised Podesta were simultaneously targeting the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. The DCC coordinates House Democratic campaigns across the country and maintains databases of voter information, campaign strategies, and fundraising data. Russian hackers sent convincingly realistic emails to DCC employees, mimicking security alerts from legitimate services. At least one employee fell for the trap, entering their credentials on a fake login page and giving the attackers access to internal DCC systems. Podesta wasn't their only target. Fancy Bear launched a sophisticated spear phishing campaign against some 300 campaign staffers. Unlike mass phishing attempts that cast a wide net with generic messages, spear phishing involves researching specific targets and crafting personalized emails that appear to come from trusted sources. The Russians studied their targets' social media profiles, professional relationships, and communication patterns. They created fake emails that referenced real people, real events, and real concerns that would resonate with each individual recipient. These carefully crafted messages used authentic Google logos and mimicked existing security alerts, demonstrating the attackers' meticulous reconnaissance of their targets' digital habits. That single click opens the floodgates. The hackers stole tens of thousands of Podesta's emails, exposing private campaign discussions, years of private conversations with Clinton campaign staff, donors, and political operatives, internal strategy documents, sensitive discussions about campaign finances and messaging, personal exchanges between some of the most powerful people in Democratic politics. The hackers now have a window into the inner workings of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and they're just getting started. Once inside the DCC network, the hackers made an incredible discovery. They found stored credentials that provided access to the Democratic National Committee itself. The DNC represents the Holy Grail for anyone trying to understand Democratic Party operations. As the central organizing body for the entire party, the DNC maintains files on campaign strategies, opposition research, internal communications between party leaders, and sensitive information about candidates and donors. Inside the DNC's files, the Russians discovered detailed opposition research on Donald Trump. The document contained potentially damaging information about the Republican candidate, compiled by Democratic researchers. They also found internal communications between DNC leadership that revealed the party's preference for Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders during the primary campaign. These discoveries gave the hackers ammunition for multiple lines of attack against Democratic Party unity and Clinton's general election campaign. The hackers immediately began exploring the DNC's digital infrastructure. They installed two types of malware on compromised systems: X-Agent and X-Tunnel. X-Tunnel acts like a backdoor VPN to Russian-controlled servers, allowing the attackers to maintain persistent access to DNC systems even if individual compromised accounts were discovered and secured. They could move laterally through the network, accessing different servers and databases while remaining undetected. Security firms weren't called in to investigate until early May 2016, more than a month after the initial Podesta compromise. Even then, the cleanup process stretched into October, just weeks before Election Day. This extended timeline gave the Russian hackers months of unrestricted access to the Democratic Party's digital communications and strategic planning materials. The intrusion continued undetected for months. The DCC and DNC leadership had no idea that Russian operatives were reading their emails, copying their files, and monitoring their communications in real time. The hackers took their time, carefully cataloging the most valuable information and planning how to use it for maximum political impact. They weren't interested in immediate financial gain or random destruction. They were conducting a strategic intelligence operation designed to influence the outcome of an American presidential election. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The DNC wasn't just dealing with one group of Russian hackers. They were dealing with two completely separate teams who had no idea the other existed. Two bears, one target. Zero communication. In a rare twist of interagency rivalry, two independent Russian teams had penetrated the same systems without coordinating. They were stealing the same files, reading the same emails, planning attacks on the same targets, and neither group knew the other one existed. This wasn't some elaborate coordinated operation. This was Russian intelligence agencies competing with each other while accidentally making their cyber attack twice as effective. Meet the two bears who couldn't talk to each other even when they were hunting the same prey. Cozy Bear arrived first. These SVR operatives represent Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the smooth professionals who prefer to work in shadows. They slipped into DNC systems back in June 2015, almost a full year before most people had even heard of Russian election interference. Cozy Bear hackers operate like patient surgeons. They make small, precise cuts. They avoid making noise. They study their targets for months before making any moves that might trigger security alerts. The SVR trained these hackers to think long-term. Instead of grabbing everything they could find and running, Cozy Bear established persistent access to DNC networks and settled in for extended surveillance. They installed custom malware that let them monitor email communications in real time. They mapped out the DNC's internal network architecture. They identified which staff members had access to the most sensitive information. They were building a complete intelligence picture of Democratic Party operations, one stolen email at a time. Then Fancy Bear showed up. These GRU operatives work for Russia's military intelligence agency, and they bring a completely different approach to cyber warfare. Where Cozy Bear moves quietly, Fancy Bear charges ahead. Where Cozy Bear plans for months, Fancy Bear executes quickly. The GRU trained these hackers to think like soldiers conducting battlefield operations rather than spies gathering long-term intelligence. Fancy Bear arrived in the DNC systems sometime in early 2016. Probably around the time they were launching their spear phishing campaign against John Podesta and other Clinton campaign staff. They immediately began installing their own malware and mapping out network access points. They were looking for specific types of information they could weaponize quickly during the election campaign. Opposition research files, internal communications that showed party bias, anything that could damage Clinton's campaign or create division within the Democratic Party. The two groups were literally working in the same digital space without realizing it. Cozy Bear would access a server to copy emails, while Fancy Bear was simultaneously installing malware on the same system. Both teams were reading identical communications and targeting the same databases. If this happened in the physical world, it would be like two burglary crews breaking into the same house through different windows. But here's where the story gets really wild. Dutch intelligence agents were watching all of this happen in real time. The AIVD had pulled off an incredible counterintelligence operation by hacking into building cameras at the Cozy Bear office. They weren't just monitoring the Russians' digital activities. They had access to security cameras inside the building where Cozy Bear operatives worked. Dutch agents could literally watch these hackers sitting at their desks in Moscow, typing commands that penetrated American political networks. Picture that for a second. Intelligence analysts in Amsterdam are drinking coffee and watching live video feeds of Russian hackers as they steal Democratic Party emails. They can see the hackers' faces. They can observe their work schedules. They know when they take lunch breaks and which ones prefer to work late shifts. The Dutch intelligence service had essentially turned the tables on one of Russia's most sophisticated cyber warfare units. The Dutch immediately shared this intelligence with American authorities. In September 2015, the FBI called the DNC to warn them about Russian hackers in their systems. But here's where everything falls apart. The FBI warning landed with a low-level IT technician who didn't grasp the severity of the threat. DNC leadership later claimed they never received any urgent warnings about state-sponsored hackers compromising their networks. This represents a major failure of threat escalation. The FBI had credible intelligence from a trusted allied nation about ongoing Russian cyber operations against a major American political organization. But institutional barriers, bureaucratic processes, and a lack of urgency allowed both hacking groups to continue operating undetected for months. The missed warning created a perfect storm of vulnerabilities. If DNC leadership had taken the FBI alert seriously and launched a comprehensive security investigation in September 2015, they would have discovered Cozy Bear's long-term presence in their systems. That investigation likely would have also revealed Fancy Bear's activities when they arrived months later. The entire Russian operation could have been exposed and neutralized before it influenced the 2016 election. Instead, both Russian agencies continued their independent operations without any coordination between them. The SVR didn't tell the GRU about their ongoing surveillance of DNC communications. The GRU didn't inform the SVR about their plans to release stolen materials during the election campaign. This lack of coordination between Russian agencies accidentally created the perfect cyber attack. Cozy Bear provided deep, long-term intelligence gathering, while Fancy Bear executed rapid-fire tactical operations. By early 2016, the Russians had accumulated massive amounts of stolen Democratic Party communications and internal documents. But stealing information is only half the battle. The fake Romanian and the strategic leak machine, the Russians needed a way to get their stolen data into public view without revealing government fingerprints. Enter Guccifer 2.0, a completely fabricated persona designed to make the world believe a lone Romanian hacker had pulled off the crime of the century. The name itself was brilliant misdirection. The original Guccifer was a real Romanian hacker named Marcel Lehel Lazar, who had gained notoriety for breaching high-profile email accounts. By creating Guccifer 2.0, Russian intelligence borrowed credibility from an existing cybercriminal while distancing themselves from any connection to the Russian state. The fake persona claimed to be a lone Romanian and communicated in broken English peppered with Romanian phrases, creating the perfect false flag operation. But one fabricated hacker wasn't enough to handle the volume of stolen materials flowing out of Democratic Party networks. In July 2016, TechLeaks.com appeared online as a supposed transparency platform dedicated to exposing political corruption. The site's design looked professional and legitimate, complete with mission statements about government accountability and democratic transparency. Behind this facade, decleaks.com served as the primary distribution center for weaponizing stolen Democratic Party communications. The timing of each document release revealed the true sophistication of this psychological warfare campaign. These weren't random data dumps by opportunistic hackers looking for quick publicity. Every leak was carefully timed to inflict maximum damage when the Clinton campaign needed to focus on positive messaging or respond to political challenges. The first major release came in July 2016, just before the Democratic National Convention. Stolen DNC emails revealed internal communications showing party leadership favoring Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders during the primary campaign. The leaked messages exposed DNC officials mocking Sanders supporters and discussing ways to undermine his candidacy. The revelations sparked outrage among Sanders delegates, and protests erupted at the Democratic Convention. Party unity, crucial for any successful presidential campaign, crumbled in real time on national television. The Russians had successfully turned Democrats against each other, using their own private communications as ammunition. The coordination between these leak operations and the Trump campaign's messaging became impossible to ignore. On July 27, 2016, Trump made his now famous statement during a press conference. "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing." He was referring to emails from Clinton's private server that had been deleted before the FBI investigation. The timing of what happened next was strikingly coincidental. 76 spear phishing emails targeted Clinton campaign staff. On the exact same day, Trump made his public call for Russian assistance. The simultaneous launch of new cyber attacks alongside Trump's statement created an unmistakable pattern of coordination. The Podesta email releases demonstrated the most sophisticated timing of the entire operation. Russian operatives held onto Podesta's stolen emails for months, waiting for the perfect moment to deploy them for maximum election impact. They began releasing batches of Podesta emails in early October 2016, just as the campaign entered its final crucial weeks. Each release was designed to create a specific narrative about Democratic Party corruption and Clinton's fitness for office. The emails revealed internal campaign discussions about Clinton's paid speeches to Wall Street banks. They exposed tensions between campaign staff and the Clinton Foundation. They showed campaign officials crafting responses to various scandals and controversies. Every revelation reinforced Trump's central campaign message that Clinton represented a corrupt political establishment. The releases followed a predictable pattern that kept Clinton's campaign in constant crisis mode. Just as campaign staff thought they had contained damage from one leak, another batch of emails would appear online. Campaign managers found themselves spending more time responding to leaked communications than promoting their candidate's policy agenda or attacking Trump's numerous vulnerabilities. This represented psychological warfare at its most effective. The Russians understood that modern political campaigns operate on carefully planned messaging strategies designed to control media narratives and voter perceptions. By forcing the Clinton campaign to constantly respond to new revelations, they disrupted Democratic messaging while providing Trump with a steady stream of attack material. Every leak was a calculated move in a broader information war designed to keep Clinton's campaign in defensive mode throughout the final months of the election. But the document releases were only one part of Russia's multi-pronged assault on American democracy. While Guccifer 2.0 dominated headlines with stolen emails, another Russian operation was quietly building something even more insidious: the troll army that organized real protests. At 55 Savushkina Street in St. Petersburg sits an ordinary-looking four-story building that most people would walk past without a second glance. But inside this unremarkable structure, hundreds of Russian operatives worked around the clock to manipulate American minds. The Internet Research Agency looked like any other modern office building. Employees badged in every morning. They grabbed coffee from break rooms. They attended team meetings and filed expense reports. The only difference was their job description: professional internet trolls paid to pretend they were American citizens. These weren't random internet troublemakers posting angry comments for fun. The IRA employed a sophisticated workforce that operated in 3 shifts to maintain constant activity across American time zones. Day shift workers focused on East Coast audiences. Evening shift targeted the West Coast. Night shift handled interactions that needed to happen during peak American social media hours. Each employee received detailed training on American culture, politics, and regional dialects. They studied American news cycles, popular television shows, and local sports teams to create convincing fake personas. The depth of their research was remarkable. Russian trolls didn't just copy and paste generic political messages. They studied specific American communities and tailored their content to local concerns and cultural references. A fake account targeting Texas voters posted about high school football and barbecue restaurants. Fake accounts in Michigan discussed manufacturing jobs and Great Lakes fishing. Accounts targeting African American communities referenced specific churches, local radio stations, and community leaders. This level of detail required extensive research and cultural understanding that went far beyond simple propaganda. Their most audacious achievement was organizing real protests in American cities using completely fake Facebook groups. The IRA created Being Patriotic and secured borders to rally conservative Americans around immigration issues. They launched Black Tivist to organize African American communities around social justice causes. These weren't just online discussion groups. They were sophisticated organizing platforms that convinced real Americans to attend actual events. On May 21, 2016, the IRA organized dueling protests outside an Islamic center in Houston, Texas. They used their fake Heart of Texas Facebook page to promote an anti-Islamic rally called Stop Islamification of Texas. Simultaneously, they used their fake United Muslims of America page to organize a counter-protest at the exact same location. Real Americans showed up to both events. Real tensions flared between opposing groups. Real police officers had to maintain order between protesters who had no idea they were being manipulated by Russian operatives sitting thousands of miles away. The scale of their social media manipulation was staggering. Their content reached over 100 million users across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. These numbers represent a significant portion of the American electorate being exposed to Russian propaganda disguised as grassroots political content. Millions of Americans unknowingly shared Russian-created posts with their friends and family members. The IRA didn't pick sides in American political debates. They amplified both liberal and conservative viewpoints to maximize division and chaos. They created fake Black Lives Matter groups and fake Tea Party organizations. They promoted pro-gun content and anti-gun content. They organized pro-immigration rallies and anti-immigration demonstrations. Their goal wasn't to promote specific political outcomes, but to drive wedges between communities. This strategy required detailed targeting based on demographics and geography. The IRA focused heavily on swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where small shifts in voter sentiment could determine electoral outcomes. They identified specific communities within these states that were already experiencing political tensions and poured gasoline on existing fires. Rural communities concerned about economic decline received content about urban elites ignoring their problems. Urban communities worried about police violence received content about systemic racism and government corruption. The timing of IRA activities coordinated perfectly with the hacking and leak operations targeting Democratic Party organizations. When stolen DNC emails revealed party bias against Bernie Sanders, IRA accounts amplified outrage among Sanders supporters. When Podesta emails surfaced in October, fake accounts spread the most damaging excerpts across social media platforms. This coordination created an echo chamber effect, where stolen information was amplified by fake grassroots outrage, making the revelations appear more significant than they might have been otherwise. The IRA's success proved that social media platforms had become the perfect weapons for psychological warfare. Russian trolls demonstrated that fake grassroots movements could organize real political events, that manufactured outrage could shape genuine political sentiment, and that foreign adversaries could manipulate American democratic processes without firing a single shot. They turned American social media users into unwitting participants in their own manipulation, creating a self-sustaining disinformation ecosystem that continued spreading Russian narratives long after the original fake accounts were discovered and deleted. But Russia's digital warfare capabilities weren't limited to keyboards and computer screens. Sometimes even the most sophisticated cyber operations required a more hands-on approach. When hackers need to get their hands dirty. April 2018. 4 men in business suits walk through Amsterdam's Schiphol airport carrying diplomatic passports and ordinary-looking luggage. Their papers identify them as Russian diplomats heading to The Hague for routine government business. But these aren't diplomats. They're GRU operatives on a mission that requires them to get their hands dirty in ways most cyber warriors never have to. What they don't know is that Dutch agents had been tracking them since the plane touched down. Meet Alexei Minin, Alexnikov, Yevgeny Sabryakov, and Alexei Morinets, 2 reconnaissance specialists and 2 hackers, forming what intelligence agencies call a cleaning crew. These teams handle operations that can't be executed remotely from Moscow office buildings. Sometimes even the most sophisticated state-sponsored hackers need to physically approach their targets, and that's when they become vulnerable to old-school counterintelligence methods. Their target wasn't some random corporate network or political organization. They were going after the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the international body investigating the Novichok poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Julia in Salisbury, England. The OPCW had just finished confirming what British investigators already knew. Russia had used a military-grade nerve agent to assassinate a former Russian spy on foreign soil. The Kremlin needed to discredit or steal that evidence before it caused even more diplomatic damage. The 4 operatives rented a small car and drove straight to an electronics store. They purchased a heavy-duty 12-volt battery and a charger, then prepared their key weapon, a hidden flat-panel antenna, to mimic OPCW Wi-Fi and harvest login credentials. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Park near the OPCW building, set up their equipment in the car's trunk. When OPCW employees tried to connect to what they thought was their office Wi-Fi, they would actually be connecting to the Russians' fake network. Every password, every login credential, every piece of data would flow directly to the hackers' computers. What these operatives didn't know was that Dutch military intelligence had been watching them since the moment they stepped off the plane. The MEVD had received a tip, probably from British intelligence, that members of APT-28 were heading to the Netherlands for a special operation. Dutch agents tracked every movement, followed every taxi ride, and monitored every equipment purchase. On April 13th, the 4 men drove to the Marriott Hotel near the OPCW headquarters. They parked their rental car as close to the target building as possible and opened the trunk. Sabryakov and Morinets, the team's hackers, began setting up their mobile command center. The battery powered a computer connected to their laptops. The voltage regulator ensured steady power flow. The Wi-Fi antenna prepared to broadcast its deceptive signal. But before they could execute their hack, unmarked Dutch vehicles surrounded their car. MIVD agents moved in for the arrest, ending the operation before it could begin. The Russians had walked directly into a counterintelligence trap that had been waiting for them since they landed in Amsterdam. The evidence found during their arrest revealed the amateur mistakes that even professional intelligence operatives make when working under pressure. Dutch authorities discovered $20,000 and $20,000 in cash, suggesting this was a well-funded operation with backup resources for extended operations or emergency escape. More damaging was a plastic bag containing trash from their hotel room, including beer cans and receipts that provided a timeline of their activities. The most incriminating piece of evidence was a taxi receipt found in Morinets's bag. The receipt documented a ride from GRU barracks to the airport on the day they departed for the Netherlands. This single piece of paper provided direct proof that their mission originated from Russian military intelligence facilities. Their electronic devices told an even bigger story. One phone had been activated just the day before their trip, with its first signal connecting to a cell tower right next to GRU headquarters. The laptops revealed that Serio had been in Lausanne in 2016, likely targeting the World Anti-Doping Agency during investigations into Russian Olympic doping programs. He had also traveled to Kuala Lumpur in December 2017, where he reportedly attempted to hack Malaysian police systems. The Dutch decided to make this operation public, holding a press conference 5 months later in September 2018 to reveal exactly what had happened. Intelligence agencies rarely expose successful counterintelligence operations, but the MIVD wanted to send a clear message about the consequences of conducting cyber warfare on Dutch soil. The 4 operatives were eventually released and sent back to Russia for diplomatic reasons, but their failed mission demonstrated a crucial vulnerability in Russian cyber warfare capabilities. When hackers need physical proximity to their targets, they become subject to traditional surveillance and arrest just like any other foreign agents. But sometimes the most revealing mistakes happen not in hotel parking lots, but in the quiet corridors of government buildings where a simple computer glitch can expose an entire intelligence operation. The Chancellor's computer and a musical hacker. May 8, 2015. Sylvester Claudia Hogel sits at her desk in the German Bundestag, trying to type an email to a colleague. She presses the keys for German accent marks, but nothing happens. The umlauts won't work. The SZ symbol refuses to appear. She tries again, still nothing. Her keyboard seems broken in the most inconvenient way possible for someone trying to write proper German. Hogel does what any reasonable office worker would do. She picks up the phone and calls the internal IT service hotline. The technician on the other end listens to her problem and gives her the standard response that IT departments everywhere have perfected over decades. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Just reboot your computer. That should fix the accent marks. The call ends with Hogel feeling slightly frustrated, but hopeful that a simple restart will solve her typing problems. No one recognized this could be malware. The IT help desk had no idea they had just dismissed the first visible symptom of one of the most serious cyber attacks in German history. While Hogel was explaining her keyboard troubles, Russian military intelligence operatives were actively moving through the Bundestag's computer networks. They had been inside Germany's parliament for at least 2 weeks already, quietly exploring systems and gathering intelligence about the country's political leadership. These weren't random cyber criminals looking for quick financial gains. The GRU had deployed APT-28, their elite hacking unit also known as Fancy Bear, against the heart of German democracy. The same group that would later attack the Democratic National Committee was already deep inside the Bundestag's digital infrastructure, methodically working toward their ultimate prize. The hackers were hunting for administrator privileges that would give them complete control over the parliamentary computer systems. They needed access to email servers, document repositories, and communication networks used by Germany's most powerful political figures. Hogel's broken keyboard was just collateral damage from their deeper penetration into the network's core systems. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A cybersecurity firm in the United Kingdom detected suspicious network traffic connecting Bundestag systems to a foreign server that had been previously linked to other cyber attacks. The firm immediately alerted Germany's Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, but bureaucratic processes slowed the response. The warning took 3 days to reach the relevant authorities who could actually investigate the potential security breach. When investigators finally arrived at the Bundestag to examine system logs, they discovered external malware installed on Hogel's computer. This sophisticated backdoor program created a continuous link back to APT-28 servers, giving the attackers persistent access to the parliamentary network, even if individual compromised accounts were discovered and secured. The malware confirmed that Russia's military intelligence service was behind the attack. The hackers had achieved their primary objective while Hogel was struggling with her keyboard. They had successfully penetrated a computer in Angela Merkel's outer office, gaining access to the German Chancellor's personal machine and email inbox. This represented an intelligence coup of the highest order, giving Russian operatives direct insight into Merkel's private communications and government decision-making processes. But extracting Merkel's emails presented an unexpected technical challenge. The hackers created a custom program called VSC.exe, designed to copy and steal the contents of her inbox. However, their first attempt failed because the program couldn't handle German O and A characters that their code couldn't process properly. The umlauts and other German-specific symbols caused the extraction program to crash, forcing the hackers to rewrite their code to accommodate German linguistic requirements. The corrected version of VSC.exe worked perfectly, successfully copying and transmitting Merkel's emails to Russian intelligence servers. But the hacker responsible for writing the program made a crucial mistake that would eventually expose the entire operation. Hidden in the code's file path was a digital signature containing the name of the computer where the program was created. See user's Scaramouche. Scaramouche became the key to unraveling the entire attack. German investigators recognized this as the hacker's alias, a reference to the clown-like character from Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. Digital forensics experts traced this handle across multiple operations to Dmitry Badin, a government hacker working for the Russian regime who specifically targeted Western democratic institutions. In May 2020, Germany's federal public prosecutor filed formal charges against Badin, marking a rare instance of successfully identifying and prosecuting a state-sponsored cyber warrior. But individual prosecutions couldn't stop the broader evolution of Russian cyber warfare. By 2022, these digital operations would become perfectly synchronized with traditional military invasions in ways that would reshape modern conflict forever. 30,000 modems. And the perfect cyber war opening. February 24, 2022, a GRU operative from Unit 74455, known as Sandworm or Voodoo Bear, sits down at his desk in Moscow. He checks his watch. The timing has to be perfect. Russian tanks are already rolling across the Ukrainian border. Artillery shells are exploding in Kiev. Fighter jets streak through the dawn sky. But this operative isn't watching the physical invasion unfold on television. He's executing the digital component of Putin's war plan. His fingers move across the keyboard with practiced precision. For months, he and his team have been preparing for this moment. They've infiltrated systems. They've mapped networks. They've positioned their digital weapons exactly where they need them. Now it's time to pull the trigger on what would become the most coordinated cyber-physical military operation in history. The target isn't some random corporate network or government database. It's Viasat's satellite internet system, a critical piece of infrastructure that keeps communications flowing across Europe and Ukraine. Satellite internet works through ground stations that route data between satellites and terrestrial networks. Take out those ground stations, and you can cripple communications across entire regions. The Russians had been studying this vulnerability for months. The attack hits 2 Viasat ground stations simultaneously. Thousands of malicious data packets flood the systems, overwhelming their capacity to process legitimate traffic. The ground stations can't handle the volume. They start dropping connections. Routing tables collapse. The entire network begins to fragment as communication pathways shut down one by one. But that's just the opening move. The real damage comes from a command long dormant in the network that had been sitting in Viasat systems for months. Waiting for this exact moment, the operative triggers a signal that reaches approximately 30,000 modems across Europe. The signal contains a simple but devastating instruction: wipe your login credentials, delete the authentication data that allows you to connect to the network, turn yourself into useless plastic and silicon. The modems obey instantly. In Germany, 5,800 wind turbines ground to a halt, and other critical services across Europe went dark. Their monitoring systems can't communicate with control centers. Maintenance crews can't access diagnostic data. Clean energy production drops as turbines go offline one by one. The modems are now electronic paperweights. Ukraine feels the attack most severely. Viasat's largest customer was the Ukrainian military, which relied on satellite communications for coordination between units, intelligence sharing, and command structure operations. As Russian armored vehicles pour across the border, Ukrainian commanders find their communication systems failing. Command dashboards go black. Surveillance feeds disappear. Radio networks fragment. The cyber attack creates exactly the communication chaos that Russian military planners needed to maximize the effectiveness of their ground invasion. This coordination between digital and physical warfare represents the evolution of modern military strategy. Previous conflicts treated cyber operations as separate from traditional military campaigns. Russia demonstrated how cyber attacks could serve as force multipliers for conventional weapons. By timing the Viasat attack to coincide with the physical invasion, they created multiple simultaneous crises that overwhelmed Ukraine's ability to respond effectively. The sophistication of this operation builds on years of Russian cyber warfare testing, conducted primarily against Ukraine. Since annexing Crimea in 2014, Russia has used Ukraine as what intelligence analysts call a cyber testing ground. They first attacked Ukraine's power grid in 2015 and 2016, then experimented with attacks on election systems and communication networks. They've refined their techniques through trial and error against a real-world adversary. Ukraine became the laboratory where Russia perfected the cyber warfare tactics they later deployed globally. This pattern explains why many Russian cyber operations first appear in Ukraine before spreading to other countries. Election interference techniques tested against Ukrainian democracy later appeared in American elections. Power grid attacks pioneered in Ukraine influenced Russian operations against European energy infrastructure. The 2022 Viasat attack represented the culmination of nearly a decade of experimentation and refinement. But Ukraine's response also demonstrated how cyber defense capabilities have evolved. Ukrainian officials had been preparing for this kind of coordinated attack since 2014. They've worked with Western cybersecurity firms to harden their networks and develop rapid response capabilities. They've trained cyber defense teams and established backup communication systems. When the Viasat attack hit, Ukraine's defenders were ready with alternative communication methods and rapid restoration procedures. The conflict revealed that Putin's bears face increasingly sophisticated opposition. All three major Russian hacking units are actively engaged in the war effort. They attack government systems, target major companies, conduct espionage operations, and fuel disinformation campaigns. But Ukrainian defenders, supported by international cybersecurity expertise, have proven formidable opponents, both on the ground and in cyberspace. The 2022 Viasat attack demonstrated that cyber warfare had evolved into the perfect complement to traditional military invasion. But even as the world watched this coordinated assault unfold, Russian hackers were already working on their next targets, adapting their methods and preparing for operations that would make the Viasat attack look like just the beginning. The bears are still hunting. Today, Russian intelligence agencies continue expanding their digital arsenal with terrifying new capabilities. Recent leaked documents from NTC Vulcan, a Russian company that supplies cyber weapons to intelligence agencies and the military, reveal exactly what Putin's digital soldiers have been planning next. These internal files show Russia developing strategies for controlling and manipulating conquered territories, with plans for bending, breaking, and remaking entire nations according to their objectives. The documents expose something truly frightening. Russian hackers are experimenting with controlling foreign critical infrastructure in ways that go far beyond shutting down power grids or disrupting internet service. A leaked internal memo indicates they tested slowing trains and thus have the capacity to speed them up. Picture that scenario for a moment. A passenger train carrying hundreds of people suddenly accelerates beyond safe speeds on a curve. A freight train loaded with hazardous chemicals barrels through a populated area at dangerous velocity. Emergency responders racing to a disaster site find their transportation systems completely unreliable. This isn't science fiction. This is what Russian cyber warfare units are actively developing right now. These capabilities represent the next evolution of cyber warfare. Previous attacks focused on stealing information or disrupting digital services. Now Russian hackers are building tools that can directly cause physical harm through digital commands. They're transforming cyber warfare from an intelligence-gathering operation into a weapon that can kill people and destroy infrastructure without ever firing a missile or deploying a soldier. Western democracies remain primary targets for ongoing Russian cyber operations. Their election systems, government networks, and critical infrastructure face constant probing and attack attempts. The 2016 election interference wasn't a one-time operation. It was a proof of concept for sustained campaigns that continue today. Russian hackers are still targeting voter registration databases, election management systems, and political party communications. The persistence of these operations proves something important. Indictments haven't stopped them. Public exposure hasn't deterred them. International sanctions haven't slowed them down. The dozens of Russian intelligence officers charged with cybercrimes continue working from their Moscow offices, protected by a government that sees their activities as legitimate military operations rather than criminal behavior. Russian hackers adapt quickly to increased scrutiny and security measures. When cybersecurity firms identify their malware signatures, they create new ones. When investigators trace their command and control servers, they build new infrastructure. When social media platforms delete their fake accounts, they create more sophisticated personas that are harder to detect. They change malware signatures and domain names faster than most organizations can defend against them. This adaptation process reveals the true scope of Russian cyber warfare capabilities. These aren't small teams of hackers working with limited resources. They have access to significant funding, advanced technical training, and institutional support that allows them to evolve their tactics continuously. They treat cyber warfare like any other military capability that requires constant innovation and improvement. The current situation resembles a high-stakes game, where both sides continuously develop new strategies. Russian hackers create novel attack methods, while Western cybersecurity experts develop countermeasures. Security researchers discover new Russian malware families, while intelligence agencies expose their operational techniques. Each defensive improvement prompts Russian hackers to find new vulnerabilities to exploit. Defensive teams are fighting back with increasingly sophisticated tools. Machine learning systems now analyze network traffic patterns to identify suspicious activities. Automated threat detection platforms can recognize and respond to cyber attacks faster than human analysts. These technological advances are becoming essential for protecting against the volume and sophistication of modern cyber threats. But this technological arms race creates new vulnerabilities even as it addresses existing ones. The same tools that defend networks can be repurposed by attackers to identify and exploit new weaknesses. Future cyber attacks will be faster, more targeted, and more adaptive than anything we've seen before. Defense strategies will need to incorporate advanced capabilities, not as optional enhancements, but as essential components of national security infrastructure. This ongoing digital conflict has become the new normal in international relations. Every government network, every critical infrastructure system, every personal computer exists as a potential battlefield in an undeclared war that never ends. Russian state-sponsored hacking has permanently changed how nations interact with each other, turning everyday technology into instruments of geopolitical competition. This digital Cold War is ongoing and intensifying. Putin's bears are still out there, and your devices are potential front lines in an undeclared digital Cold War. The question isn't whether they'll strike again, but when and where their next operation will unfold. Conclusions. These operations have fundamentally transformed international conflict. Russian hackers proved that keyboards can be as powerful as missiles. But unlike missiles, these attacks can remain hidden for months while causing maximum damage. They changed how nations attack each other forever. Every election interference operation, every infrastructure attack, every stolen government email shows us the new reality of digital warfare. This isn't just about governments and military targets anymore. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility now. Your personal data, your workplace networks, your community's infrastructure, all of it exists on the front lines of this digital war. Understanding phishing tactics and maintaining strong security practices isn't optional anymore. Use two-factor authentication and watch for phishing red flags. Right now, Putin's bears are planning their next operation. The only question is where they'll strike next. Share your thoughts below on how we stay safe in this digital battlefield, and leave your best guesses in the comments about their next target.